On today's Locked On Jayhawks, previewing Kansas, West Virginia. It's a new season as Big 12 play gets it going.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, Blue Sky at Derek Johnson, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. Thank you for listening to Locked On Jayhawks. On today's episode, we're previewing Kansas and West Virginia. Big 12 play gets going. It's a day game on the 31st, which, for some people they're off. Others still going to be at work. So it'll be interesting what goes on there. I believe the alumni band is playing for this game to shout out to all the alumni coming back to participate in the band for this one for KU and their Big 12 opener against Mountaineers. We're going to get to our headlines of the game. We're going to get to our opponent's scouting report of West Virginia, what they bring to the table, matchups of the game that could decide it, and players to watch for the Jayhawks versus the Mountaineers. So let's start with the headlines for this one. It is the Big 12 opener for KU. They've had so much success winning Big 12 openers. And when you look at the start of the Big 12 play for KU this year, this opener in these first really 3 games become, I think, of maximum importance, right? If KU wants to win the Big 12, which, we can argue back and forth, I think, now about the streaks not going and the conferences, all conferences have become so large that, obviously, you do want to win the conference. You're competing to win that. But at the end of the day, with imbalanced schedules, is it as prominent to win your conference now as it was in the past? Probably not. Doesn't mean you don't want to win it. Doesn't mean you're not competing in it and not trying to win it. But I guess point being is, especially in 20-game conference, if Kansas goes 15-5 and some other team goes 16-4 and they might have had a slightly easier schedule than Kansas did, or, in the case of that happening, Kansas at 15-5 is probably still going to be set up that they're going to get either a very high 2 seed or a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. It's not the end of the world. So it is still fun to root for. It is still important, but it's obviously not the same level of stress or thinking about every game, since the streak is no longer a thing that applies. But you look at it, and you're versus West Virginia, at UCF, versus Arizona State, your first 3 games. Those are all very winnable games for you. And then it gets difficult at Cincinnati, at Iowa State. Not that these aren't difficult, because everybody in the Big 12 is good, but you have those immediately after. And then you're looking at Kansas State, at TCU, Houston, UCF, at Baylor, Iowa State back at home. So it's going to be a difficult stretch, and you need to take advantage of the stretches that you have that are a little bit more winnable, and this is one of those. West Virginia is a good team. I don't want to take away from that, but you're playing them at home. You're favored in this game, right? Take care of business at home, right? This is also your first game in basically 9 days. It's also your first game against a power opponent in 17 days before you played NC State. And so, what are they going to show? What are they going to look like? Are they going to be a better version? Are we going to see a better version of AJ Storr and Ryland Griffin and Shaquille Moore and some of these guys on the roster? I think that'll be interesting for KU in this one. The opponent's scouting report. West Virginia comes in at 9-2 on the season. They're ranked just inside the top 50. If you look at KenPom, they're ranked just outside of the top 40. If you're looking at Bart Torvik, and you look at their resume so far, most of their wins are sub top 200 teams, even sub top 250 teams. But they did get a crown jewel win defeating Gonzaga in the first round of the Battle for Atlantis. They won that game in overtime. It was a really fun back and forth game. Then they ended up beating Arizona in overtime, and they also beat a Georgetown team that, not great, but they are top 100 at least, so it's fine. And they won that game by 13, so credit to them. The 2 losses they've had, they lost to Pittsburgh by 24 points. They've blown out there. Pittsburgh's been a really good team this year, and then they lost in overtime at the Battle for Atlantis. I guess all 3 of their Battle for Atlantis games are overtime. That's incredible. To Louisville, who at the time was a better version of Louisville than they are now. They had one of their best players since then has been out for the year with an injury. But you look at the personnel for West Virginia, and the guy leading them in scoring right now is a guy that you should be familiar with from the Big 12 last year. That would be Javon Small. He was the leading scorer for Oklahoma State, 6'3" guard, enters the portal. KU was going for him. Bill Self actually talked about it a little bit in his press conference leading up until this game, and KU was going after him, and KU wanted to land him, and he ended up going to West Virginia. And maybe from his point of view, he was like, well, what's my role going to be? I think it would have been easy to see him. I don't know. Maybe the starting lineup right now would just be Dajuan, Javon Small, Zeke Mayo. You'd be playing 3 guards, and then you'd have KJ at the 4 and Hunter at the 5. I don't know. That'd be an interesting, and maybe David Coit's not here. Who knows the sliding doors moment of if you do land Javon Small, but he's been excellent for West Virginia so far. Plays the 1 and the 2. He's been an elite scorer, 19.7 points per game, and he does it on ultimate high efficiency. 45% from the floor, 39% from 3, 87% at the free throw line. He's also getting over 4 rebounds, 4 assists per game, and over 2 steals per game. So he's well on his way to all Big 12 honors. Obviously, numbers in non-con are going to look much different once you get into conference play. You're playing the same teams. You're playing all these good defenses and good teams in the Big 12. But still, those are monster numbers that if he keeps that up through the rest of the season, he's probably a first-team All-Big 12 pick. And so you look at him, he becomes a difficult matchup. Then you look at the rest of their backcourt. They have a couple guards who can come off the bench and score it a little bit. 6-foot KJ Tenor, former Jayhawk Joe Yesufu, who's at 36% from 3 right now. Tenor and Yesufu are combining for like 8.5 points per game. The guy who is kind of a counter to all 3 of those was Small, Tenor, and Yesufu being these maybe more scoring guards is 6'4" Sincere Harris. He is not much of a scorer. He's under 5 points per game. He's shooting like 30% from the floor. He's not been a good offensive player or a shooter, but he's getting almost 5 rebounds per game. He's been excellent on the defensive end of the court. And so they have this kind of defensive stopper to mix on the outside. And I'd imagine he's going to be drawing the matchup with Zeke Mayo, which might make life a little bit more difficult for Mayo in this game. You look at the wing for West Virginia, 6'6", Jonathan Powell. He can play the 3 and the 4. He's a sniper from the outside, over 35% from 3, which doesn't sound like elite, but it's very high volume. He doesn't really do much else, but he is a very good 3-point shooter. Think Isaiah Moss in a wing body. Which I guess Moss was like 6'4", 6'5", so maybe that's doing him disservice. Anyway, you look at the 4-man, Toby Okani. He is averaging 9 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. He's a good efficiency in the flow shooting overall, like shoots well from 2, shoots well from 3. Doesn't take a ton of shots, though. So he's taking good shots in the offense, but he's not necessarily creating a ton. And then you look at the center position. They can stretch it a little bit. 6'8", 240-pound Amani Hansberry. He's averaging 10.6 points, 6.6 rebounds. He is taking 39 3-point attempts so far this season. So you're getting off about 3.5, 4 per game from him. It's only been 28% from 3, but it's the threat that has to space you out a little bit. And that would be the classic Kansas thing. If they're like, hey, you know what? He's not shooting great from 3. We're going to let him take the 3s and just live with it and hope that he only takes 3 and at most makes 1. And then he goes 3 for 3 or something, or he's like 3 for 4, right? Wouldn't that be the most Kansas thing ever? Anyway, he gets rotated in for 6'11", 240-pound Eduardo Andre, who, and sometimes Hansberry can even play the 4 if they want to. Andre isn't a huge scorer, but he's been an excellent defender. 4.4 rebounds per game, 2.3 blocks per game, and that's in just 15 minutes a night. So this is one of the premier shot blockers so far in the Big 12 that they have kind of rotating in between that 2-center lineup, so to speak. They have another center that they rotate in like sparingly here and there, who is also 6'8". What's interesting, though, is their stud wing. They're probably, I guess, the highest pedigree potential NBA player, Tucker DeVries. He was an unbelievable player at Drake the past couple of years, came over to West Virginia when his dad, Darian DeVries, who is now the head coach at West Virginia, took the job. And I would imagine Tucker DeVries is going to be a future NBA player. Like, I don't know if he's going to be a drafted player. He might be, because the shot making is that good when you look at certain draft boards going around. Unbelievable shot maker. He can hit them from super deep. He can hit them from different actions, but he got hurt like 3 weeks ago. He's been out indefinitely is what they said when he got hurt. So I don't know that he's supposed to be back or not. I almost feel like that would make me assume he's not going to be back, but if he is, he's averaging nearly 15 points per game on 47% from 3 when he has played this season, and he's been an excellent shooter all throughout his career. So that would certainly change things in how KU would have to defend him. When you look at what they do well so far this season, they shoot the 3 ball. They have one of the highest rates nationally in terms of the amount of 3s they're getting up, and they're shooting it at a very solid percentage. They also shoot free throws well, which makes sense. They've been good in transition. They're getting points off turnovers at a good rate. They've also been at least above average at 2-point offense in avoiding turnovers on that end of the floor. Now, on the defense side of the ball where they've done well, they've just been really good overall. You look at Tucker DeVries at Drake the past couple of years, like they've just had really good defenses. He's translated that over. They have a top 30 defense on Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency. They are top 10 nationally right now in 2-point defense. They limit the amount and efficiency of 3-point shots you get up. Very analytically based defense. They're going to try to make you take mid-range shots. They're also in the 81st percentile or better. So basically in the top 5th of college basketball in all of these categories. And a lot of them, they're in the 90th percentile or better. Steal rate, block rate, Hakeem percentage, which is block plus steal rate, personal foul efficiency, which is your rate of blocks and steals compared to flat fouls. They've been good at avoiding points in the paint. They've had an elite fast break defense too. So there haven't been a lot of easy ways to score on West Virginia so far. Now, what they have struggled with, this isn't necessarily something they've struggled with, but it is something to keep in mind when you talk about all those great defensive statistics. Ken Palm, you can look at the adjusted, schedule that they've played on Ken Palm, and you can look at not just the overall net rating of the opponents that they've played, but you can also look at, how good of offenses and how good of defenses have they played so far. So according to Ken Palm, West Virginia has played the 163rd best schedule, but that's better on defense than it is on offense, because on offense, they have played the 208th best offensive schedule so far in the country. So some of those defensive numbers are good, and you can also say, well, their defense has made the opposing offenses rank worse. But that is also good to know, and the only top 100 offenses they've faced have been Gonzaga, Arizona, Louisville, and Pitt. And all 4 of those games were their worst defensive performances by, I would say, a decent margin to what their average is. So additionally, beyond that, like they're a below average offensive rebounding team. I think part of that is designed. They're trying to get numbers back in transition defense. They don't get to the free throw line a ton. They don't get a lot of shots in the paint or score second chance points offensively. So if they're having a bad night from 3, it's going to be a long night for them. And then they've been below average in defensive rebound rate while allowing the highest rate in the country of opponent percentage of points coming from second chance points per game. So if Kansas can have a good offensive rebounding game, then they're going to be able to rack up some easy points in that area. All right, let's get to our matchups of the game. Players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Rocket Money, a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. One of the best features, in my opinion, it's the subscription tracker, right? You might have all these TV services, and you might have some of these website subscriptions, and things are just getting out of hand. Well, you can save a ton because it's going to allow you to see everything you got. Plus, with their goals feature, you can be able to automatically set money aside for your future, where you don't have to stress out about your budget every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, continuing on. Locked On Jayhawks here. KU West Virginia preview. We get to our matchups of the game. Matchup number 1, defending the 3 ball. West Virginia doesn't have a lot of they don't get a ton of shots at the rim. They don't have a ton of other avenues to score. So if you can do a good job here, you're going to win the game. I guess point being, right? The flip side, what have we seen from a lot of teams that have come in down Fieldhouse and defeated KU? They're hot from 3, or they're able to generate good looks from 3 consistently and knock them down at a high rate. Obviously, this helps for KU if Tucker DeVries can't go. But this is a West Virginia team that still shoots them at a high rate from a lot of other people all over the place. They're averaging almost 30 3-point attempts per game. That is 95th percentile nationally. They're also in the 73rd percentile nationally, shooting over 35% from 3. So high volume, good efficiency. They also have one of the highest rates of above the break threes nationally. And that's going to be hard, I think, for KU to defend because, it's one thing if they're taking a bunch of corner threes where it's maybe more predicated on like driving kicks and stuff like that, where you can just tell your wing on the outside, hey, just stick on the guy. And if their player drives in and gets a layup at the rim, we're just going to kind of deal with it. It's harder when it's the above the break threes, and that tells you that it's really coming from all over the place. There's more space there. It's harder for your big men like Hunter Dickinson to come out and guard those types of threes, so that could be a little bit difficult for KU in this matchup. They're also taking like 9 threes a game. If DeVries is counted in too, then it's like 12 from just threes that are 25 or more feet per game. So let me rephrase that. Basically, deep threes, 25 or more foot threes. They're basically getting like 10 of those per game. So it's not just that you can defend the line, you have to extend out. And that makes it even more difficult, I think, given some of the limitations to what we think of Kansas on the defensive end of the court. But the recipe, like I said, to come in and Allen Fieldhouse is if they can come in and hit a bunch of threes. We saw KU defend the three well against Brown, who is a team who's kind of similar in being able to shoot a lot of threes. But this is different with West Virginia. They've got better athletes. They've got a better defense to go with it. So Kansas has to defend the three-point line and keep West Virginia from just kind of going off here. Number 2 is Kansas scoring on the interior. The two teams who by far had the best 2-point offenses that West Virginia faced this season in terms of how the games went were, both losses for the Mountaineers, and one of them was a blowout loss. They allowed over 58% on 2-point shots in the loss to Pitt and the loss to Louisville. Every other opponent has been held to under 52%. So keep in mind, this is something that doesn't have to just come on first touches, right? They gave up a ton of second chance points. The negative here is Kansas only ranks 32nd percentile nationally, so well below average at 9.5 offensive rebounds per game. They're only in the 25th percentile in the percentage of the Kansas points that come from second chance points. So I don't know if you view that as this is good for West Virginia because something they've struggled with, Kansas doesn't do well to take advantage, or if this becomes something where Kansas, which is normally not something they have going their way, can turn into something that is a little bit more of an advantage, and it just gives them another notch in their belt in a way that they can kind of take advantage of West Virginia in this game. But keep this in mind when you're talking about scoring inside. Kansas is shooting 71% at the rim. That is 94th percentile nationally. That's not all 2-point shots, but that's just at the rim specifically. They're also shooting them at a high rate, right? That's what this Kansas team wants to do. West Virginia's at the rim defense ranks in the 81st percentile nationally. So they've been one of the better teams in the country in preventing shots or limiting shots at the rim when you get there. But again, if we go back to what we said earlier, talking about the schedule that they faced, the offenses that they faced, if you just look at their games against power opponents, Arizona shot 14 of 19 at the rim. That's 74%. Pitt was 11 of 15. That's 73%. Gonzaga was 11 of 23, so that's 48%. So that would be a notch in West Virginia's belt in a very real way. Not sure you expect Graham Ike to go 1 of 5 on twos very often, so I don't know if that's more about he was just having an off day or it was something West Virginia was doing. But Louisville was 15 of 23. That's 65% at the rim. And then Georgetown was 7 of 16, 44% at the rim. But Georgetown is also by far the worst school among that list of teams that they played. But if we total all 5 up, Arizona, Pitt, Gonzaga, Louisville, Georgetown, those best teams that they played, they're allowing 60% at the rim, which would rank them much closer to the national average of about 62%. Allowed at the rim. Right now in the season, they're allowing 57. So it would go up. I don't know that that's like an overwhelming difference. But if we get rid of that Georgetown game, because like we said, Georgetown is by far the worst team of that bunch. You look at the Arizona, Pitt, Gonzaga, and Louisville games. West Virginia allowed about 64% at the rim this season, which would be below average nationally. And KU is shooting 71% at the rim offensively. So point being, this is definitely a key matchup. It's going to be one that is going to challenge Kansas and challenge a Kansas strength. And one Kansas wants to take advantage, but it's not a guarantee that even though West Virginia has done a good job preventing these shots this season, that it's going to continue in this game when you base it on some of the better opponents and bigger opponents that West Virginia has faced. Number 3 is Kansas hitting their middies. Got to hit your mid-range in this one because West Virginia tries to play an analytical game on defense. They try to limit your shots at the rim, and they try to limit your 3-point shots. They want you to take mid-range jump shots, right? And going back to what we just said, like Kansas is still going to try to, get it inside and get their shots there. But basically 90% of college basketball gives up less mid-range shots than West Virginia. So, like, they are really trying to funnel you into those. Which means even if Kansas is successful in getting the ball inside against West Virginia, they're probably still going to end up with more mid-range shots than normal. Good news for Kansas, they've actually shot mid-range shots pretty well so far this season. They're in the 84th percentile nationally in mid-range field goal percentage, but you got to be able to knock them down in this game because those are going to be available to you, but also don't take them too early in the offense. Okay, let's get to our players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you for making this your first listen every day. Don't forget you check out Locked On College Basketball, Locked On College Football for your second listen every day. Check out our bonus episode too, where Bill Self called Darren Peterson the best recruit they've gotten at Kansas, and also KU football landed Bryson Canty, a wide receiver from Columbia. Okay, so our players to watch in this one. Let's get our player matchup. We're going to go Javon Small versus Dajuan Harris. I think it's pretty obvious Javon Small. I mean, he's, especially with Tucker DeVries out, if he is going to be out in this game, which he has been for a while, he's their leading scorer. He's their go-to scoring option. He is a dynamic player. With Dajuan Harris, he's a very good defender, and so automatically that just becomes a very intriguing matchup. Now, I will say, I don't think Small Small's not the best defender, and some of their other guards, obviously Sincere Harris is a great defender, but some of their other guards aren't great defenders. So can Harris take advantage on the offensive end? But on that defensive end, that'll be obviously be the most important thing for Dajuan Harris. What I do find interesting is Javon Small played Kansas twice last season when he was at Oklahoma State. I think he probably, I know. But this West Virginia team is better than that Oklahoma State team was. Like, his teammates are better around him this year than he had last year. But Small was 4 of 20 in the two matchups against Kansas. He averaged 5 points per game. He averaged 3.5 turnovers per game. So Dajuan Harris shut him down. Now, Bill Self mentioned in the press conference that, there were some shots that he definitely missed that he normally makes. So even if you account for that, though, let's say he went 7 of 20, that'd still be 35%. And he'd still be averaging close to 7 points per game with 3.5 turnovers per game. Dajuan Harris did an excellent job on Javon Small last year. If he can continue to do that in this one, you're going to like the way the result looks at the end of the game, I'd assume. High on the go-off meter, we're going to go with Hunter Dickinson. West Virginia is not a good rebounding team, so an opportunity for Hunter to rack up a lot of rebounds to get some of those second chance points that West Virginia gives up a ton of. And yes, West Virginia has done well preventing interior offense, but it's another level with KU. It's another level when, it's one thing when you're playing a team who's ranked 237th in the country. And for instance, they beat Mercyhurst in their most recent game, 67-46. And I didn't even know Mercyhurst was a D1 team. They're ranked 354th, right? Mercyhurst, their center rotation is 6'8" freshman, 6'7", and then 6'6", right? It's one thing to shut those guys down. It's another thing to shut down a first or second team All-American and Hunter Dickinson, who is still 7'2" and giant. And the West Virginia centers are 6'8" and 6'10". Like, even the 6'10" guy who comes in there, he's been an excellent defender, good shot blocker. You're still getting up 4 inches there. And that's not me to say that, West Virginia is not still going to be able to make stops. Like, of course they are. Of course, they're still going to be a good interior defensive team. But I'm just saying, I still think Hunter is going to be able to score when he can. And he's missed some shots that maybe normally he wouldn't in the first half of the season. I think the time off, reset a little bit, plus go back to the mid-range conversation. Dickinson can hit pick and pops in the mid-range too. He's actually ranking above average nationally in the mid-range zone. So I think Hunter Dickinson's going to have a big game for KU against West Virginia. The big question for me is, what is it going to look like on the defensive end of the court? Can West Virginia space him out and try to get him out of the game that way, where Floyd Badunga has to play maybe a bigger role in this game? I think that'll be intriguing as well. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. And we'll see you next time for a KU West Virginia recap right here with LOJ.